Thousands of people lived there. There were hundreds of acres of junkyards, illegal dumps, gas stations that had been leaking into the groundwater. There was no public utilities, water or sewer. And so there was actually no rule of law in that 12 square mile space. I'm not okay with brown water coming from my sink. Why is it okay for Bithlo to have brown water? Your likelihood to succeed or fail was based on where you were born, and it just didn't seem okay.
The bulk of the people out there that are using their voice are simply bitch moaning and complaining about what they're seeing.
Basically, our organization is really trying to create a model to solve poverty in tough communities. And we work to resolve any barrier to success in that space. What we didn't want to have happen is what's happened in Paramore and almost every other major, quote, transformation effort is the people get pushed out with when the bulldozers come with the promise that they're going to get to move back.
Yeah.
And that never happens.
And what he's trying to do is he's literally not just trying to do, what he is doing is saving a community, and he's saving the community's history as well.
We need to remake what's happening in Bithlo and how Bithlo is operating so that the goal would be one day you can be more than Bithlo and not need a program. We're never going to change the plan because these ingredients are needed in every community for it to be a healthy place to live.
Hi, everyone. Tracy Lewis with Imagine Marketing, and I'm joined by Pastor Scott, who is the CEO and founder of Matthew's Hope, as well as Timothy McKinney, who is the CEO of United Global Outreach. Thank you for being here. Welcome to episode 71 of Straight Talk, No BS with Matthew's Hope, presented by Imagine Marketing. Well, we will be talking with Timothy about the Transformation Village in Bithlo, Florida.
Great.
What is United Global Outreach, and how does it relate to the Transformation Village in Bithlo, Florida?
Yeah, so basically our organization is really trying to create a model to solve poverty in tough communities. So it's a place-based approach. And so in Bithlo, it's a semi-rural community. So we take a 12 square mile area, which is the census designated place, and we work to resolve any barrier to success in that space. And we focus primarily on 10 areas simultaneously that need to be working right in every community for it to be a healthy place to live. Education, transportation, housing, healthcare, the environment, basic needs, which include social services, economic opportunity, the arts and athletics, building a sense of community. And then we've most recently added a 10th area of focus, which is restoring safety and security, because without safe and secure communities, you can't have healthy communities. And so Transformation Village is actually a place because Bithlo never had a town or village center. So we've been building out the town center for Bithlo, which we call Transformation Village. And a lot happens at that place.
So, Tim, why Bithlo?
I went through a personal transition now 16 years ago and was really reflecting on what are the next priorities for me in my life. And a friend of mine challenged me to find a community that needed help and help them. And really at the time he was saying, stop focusing on your own problems and focus on the problems of others, and then things will happen. And so I thought, where's a community that's had a tough reputation as long as I've been alive? And I grew up in Orange County. My family's been here 100 years last year on my mom's side, and 70 years on my dad's side. And Bithlo has always had a just like I said, a tough reputation. And so I decided to take a drive out there and find out why. And my buddy Tony that I was talking to, who at the time had been a missionary to the Roma in Romania for 20 years, upstate New York Italian, he's like, we know a pastor in Bithlo. I'm like, we do? And it turned out this guy that I didn't even know was an ordained pastor that I hadn't seen in more than 10 years was out there pastoring this little church in Bithlo. So took a ride out, talked to Pastor Frank about what was happening. And the things he laid out for me were really disturbing in the sense that I grew up in Orange County in Conway, but I never experienced a lot of the structural and systems things that were not working properly that really led to generational poverty and struggle, which ultimately ended up determining that your likelihood to succeed or fail was based on where you were born. And it just didn't seem okay.
Can you talk a little bit more about the history of Bithlo, or for the listeners and myself that aren't very familiar with, is it a town, city?
Well, it was an incorporated city. That's actually how it kind of got in the mess that it's in. It literally was the city of Bithlo, and more booming, if you could imagine, than the city of Orlando back in the 1910s, right on the Flagler Railroad. Number two, I think, in cattle production, lumber mills, turpentine factories, a lot of things happening there. And then Boston real estate developers started promoting, let's move to sunny Bithlo. And so they started selling land in Bithlo. The city of Bithlo took out bonds to support this rapid growth. And then the Roaring 20s came to a sudden collapse, which led to the Great Depression, and people stopped closing on those bonds. So worse than going out of business, they stayed an incorporated city all the way until the 70s. So they finally stopped electing mayors and city councilmen in the late 30s, early 40s. And so there was actually no rule of law in that 12 square mile space. So that's, if you wanted to set up a junkyard, a dump, trailer park, whatever, you could do it in there, and there wasn't the same rules and regulations and enforcement the government would normally have to make sure things are set up properly. And so in the 70s, like 1 million tires, I think, caught fire and blew into Orlando, which it used to be when I was growing up before the expressway system. Bithlo was forever away.
Yeah.
And so that black smoke blew into town, and people were like, what's going on in Bithlo? We've got to do something about that. So the legislature unincorporated the city of Bithlo for Orange County government to take over. And then Orange County said, hey, no way, we're not going to be responsible for the debts of the city of Bithlo. So it was another decade that the lawyers actually got the courts to agree that the Orange County government was not responsible for the city of Bithlo's bond debt. And so now what does the county do? They just basically laid zoning over that 12 square mile area as if it was a blank field. The problem is it wasn't a blank field. Thousands of people lived there. There were hundreds of acres of junkyards, illegal dumps, gas stations that had been leaking into the groundwater. There was no public utilities, water or sewer. And so literally in the middle of a field or a junkyard might be zoned a church or a neighborhood. And so their thought process was eventually we'll grandfather in what's there, and then over time, it'll work itself out. And that might be 500 years, but we can't afford to wait 500 years because real people are living there in the meantime, and they're suffering the consequences of the damage that they didn't do to themselves. Actually, it was a civics failure that led to that. So in coming there, a lot of times people had challenged me and said, it seems like the Bithlo needs to change its name. But when you look into the history and you understand how things developed, and then you realize that's a Muskogee Indian word for canoe. Okay. It's not some negative connotation. Then it starts to make sense that we need to remake what's happening in Bithlo and how Bithlo is operating, so that the goal would be one day you can be more than Bithlo and not need a program.
But what would be just easier? Let's just pretend it never happened. The challenges are, which Tim faces all the time out there, is like their groundwater situation out there is amazingly terrible to where it's literally has created health issues for people. Because keep in mind, you said earlier, the turpentine plants and stuff, there was stuff dumped into that ground and to this day, they still don't have access, correct me if I'm wrong, to a lot of the city type water.
The good news is 350 homes as we speak are getting public water. So finally, but again, to bring public water to Bithlo, you have to go back to where the water pipe is big enough to bring it forward. So our work has had to be beyond that 12 square mile area. And it's been the culmination of 15 years worth of collective impact and dedication and really building political power, if you will, not because we're powerful and not certainly because elected officials necessarily cared directly about Bithlo, because there weren't a lot of people voting. And there's not a lot of money. Those seem to be the two things that draw most politicians. And so what we had to do was get people that politicians do care about to care about Bithlo. And then that build the momentum. So it was Rotary, it was Kiwanis, it was Advent Health, it was churches, it was those that are out external. And then suddenly they were saying, hey, I'm not okay with brown water coming from my sink. Why is it okay for Bithlo to have brown water? And we started giving these, what the Orlando Sentinel called at one point, the notorious Bithlo tours, and inviting people out and driving them around in my pickup truck and having them see an illegal dump that you would not see just going down Colonial on the way to the beach.
Yeah, and, if you didn't an aerial, you wouldn't even know it was there.
And seeing the water glass literally settle with iron in the bottom of the glass by the end of the conversation. And so exposing them to things that I didn't know myself, having gone through Bithlo 100 times in my life, headed to the beach on Colonial. Until you get off of the highway, you don't know what's really happening to and affecting thousands of people.
Right. So what is Transformation Village?
So like I said, we're developing out the town center. So what it is today, the first thing we did was we acquired that church property, because at First Baptist Church of Bithlo, when I went out to talk to Pastor Frank, he was literally having the power shut off. There was a handful of senior folks that just didn't have the physical or financial ability to keep going. The community already thought the church had gone out of business because it would look so dilapidated. So we acquired that property first with the understanding that we would do positive things for the community, and we would renovate and allow that the church's vision originally to be fulfilled in reaching the community. And we did that. Then we acquired a couple of other parcels over time. So currently we have Orange County Academy, which we founded a school for kids in trauma to try to create an environment for kids that, in spite of what's happening to you or has happened, is currently happening, or maybe even pre-birth, being born of addicted parents, that you could succeed anyway. So currently we have, as we built out 10 by 10 Sunday school rooms to be 10 by 20 classrooms and renovated, we have about 70 kids, K3 through 12th grade. And then we have GED classes in addition to that. We have a community center building that used to be a machine shop. So we're all about no red tape, by the way. So where the county park closes at 6 and is closed on holidays and weekends, we're open 24/7. So if you need to play bingo on Friday, a wedding, a funeral, a birthday party, lunches, meals for the community, whatever, that's available at Transformation Village. We have this cute little house, was another property we acquired that was the owners of the machine shop retired and built their little dream home. So we have this cute house that doesn't look like a typical home in Bithlo. That's our community coffee shop and library. And so that's open 7 days a week now. In trying to figure out how to address the housing issue, which a lot of the housing inventory in Bithlo is trailers and trailer parks. And what we didn't want to have happen.
Not in good shape.
Not over time, they become incubators for mold, mildew, termites, rats, roaches, depreciating assets, especially when water intrudes. What we didn't want to have happen is what's happened in Paramore and almost every other major, quote, transformation effort is the people get pushed out when the bulldozers come with the promise that they're going to get to move back.
Yeah.
And that never happens. So we designed small houses, real houses that meet the building code, that are of the quality that we would want for ourselves, so we could systematically replace your trailer with a real home and keep you in place. We could replace the trailer park with a small house village. And so at Transformation Village is our model small home, which we love everybody to come and see, because we now realize, besides the original design purpose, we need a lot of affordable housing in our area. And we think these small homes are going to be really a way we can build thousands of units rapidly. We recently opened our medically assisted treatment center to address substance use disorder and behavioral health issues. So we have a clinic there, which is historic because, like so much that's happening in Bithlo, there's never been access to care before. So if you wanted to get your addiction addressed, if you wanted to get off of fentanyl, for example, which requires medical assistance, the drug is so powerful, it was miles and miles away. Therefore, you couldn't access the care. Now, we're seeing dozens and dozens and dozens of people that are getting their lives put together because they can see the psychiatrist in the neighborhood. They can go to the doctor for that medical assistance. So that clinic is there, and that's exciting. And then we have playgrounds and other things that are going on. Community garden, 2 aquaponic systems, which we were raising tilapia and perch, but the kids at the school kept naming the fish, so we never could have a fish fry.
That's a problem.
Once you name them,
we're rebooting now to do more tropical fish like you'd have in your aquarium, so they could actually have their own social enterprise and raise the fish and sell them off. Chicken coops. I think we're getting a couple of goats, I heard, soon. So a lot of stuff currently happening. And then we're very excited about the expansion plan that's currently underway. We're working to acquire additional property. And when we do, we'll build our first small house village of about 25 homes, which will represent the 5 floor plans that we have currently, from a 1-bedroom, 1-bath, 400 square foot home up to a 3-bedroom, 2-bath that's about 750 square feet. And we'll build an academic building that'll focus on tech to trade. So robotics, small electronics, HVAC, plumbing, electrical, carpentry, welding, broadband jobs, maybe some healthcare careers, high-paying jobs that don't require a traditional degree. But we have an emerging partnership with the National Center for Simulation Lab, and my friend Lindsay that runs the lab, she's like, Tim, whatever we do on Earth, we have to do under the ocean and in space. So let's call it space welding. It's way cooler and more people will want to do it. Right. So that's going to be coming online with a retail component. So we'll be able to move the clinic eventually to Colonial, where 45,000 cars a day pass through Bithlo, and then help even more folks in East Orange County get help with addiction and behavioral health issues. And then to me, the part that I'm most excited about, well, two things I'm excited about. One, we're going to build an assembly facility where we're going to be able to mass produce small homes. So we're going to educate on site, and then we're going to hire and employ folks to produce small houses, not just for replacing trailers and trailer parks, but also for helping address the Orange County alone 100,000 unit deficit in low income housing. And then the most exciting part, which is going to seem weird to everybody else, but it's been the bane of my existence since I've been in Bithlo, is we're going to put in a $450,000 sewer treatment system, which is actually going to make all the plumbing work.
It changes everything.
One of the reasons why we realized shortly after going to Bithlo, organizations weren't working in Bithlo, one of the many reasons was there's no access to water and sewer, which makes everything more expensive. So I've been having shitty conversations for the last 15 or 16 years. And Scott, I'm trying to raise funds.
Yeah.
Try to raise funds for a sewer treatment system.
It's not sexy.
It's not sexy.
It's now you know why I wanted Tim to come on our podcast. Because though we're doing different things, the vision aspect of it continues to roll out.
Yeah.
And the longevity and the willingness to keep boots on the ground and keep pushing forward. There's things that, before we sat down, I shared a little bit with you all that, when I first met Tim, Charlene wanted me to meet this guy. And quite honestly, I really didn't want to. I read a little bit about him. Charlene's telling me how what a great guy he is. I'm going, yeah, but it looks like we disagree on a lot of stuff here, and then of course we meet downtown, and I'll just share it on here because people will appreciate it. I take my truck down, and we're meeting down at the Starbucks below the Citrus Tower, our Citrus Club, and I go up to park my thing, and my truck is too tall and it gets stuck. Now I'm more pissed off because I don't want to be there to begin with. So I'm trying to get my truck out of there. I back into a vehicle. Now I've got to get out, write a note that I've just wrecked somebody's vehicle. So by the time I meet Tim, it's like, I didn't want to say this, but I hate you already. And I don't want to be here. And I'm doing this because at the time, my girlfriend says we should meet. Fast forward over time. I'm watching him. He's watching us. We're having conversations on and off throughout the years. And though Tim's vision is very different, much of it's very much the same at the same time. And we realize that the bulk of the attention of Orange County is spent on Orlando. But your highest levels of homelessness and poverty, he probably has more poverty than homelessness than I have as far as dealing with, because we deal with just homelessness. He does both. Okay. The bottom line is we're dealing with a lot of the same issues. And if we put our voices together, it's stronger than us on either side of this place trying to yell across the room to each other. We've got to get the attention of the leadership. And I say that with quotations on both sides, because leaders change things. They just don't go to meetings and talk about them. We have been talking about some of the same things now for a dozen plus years. I've watched you at several county meetings and things like that. Go up with your 3 minutes like I have and try to, in 3 minutes, try to open somebody's eyes, which quite honestly, if they just open their eyes, they wouldn't even have you would not even have to be there to bring attention to it.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that Tim is dedicating himself to continuously bring attention and get outside the box and realize, yes, you can chasing the sexy things. Sexy things are easy to get funded. People get pictures taken around them. We do the photo op, we do that thing, we pat ourselves in the back, and we go on about our business. What he's trying to do is he's literally not just trying to do, what he is doing is saving a community, and he's saving the community's history as well. Most places would want to get, again, just let's rename this and pretend it never happened.
Yeah.
That's the problem. We can't keep renaming things and pretend it didn't happen.
Right.
We need to understand our failures and shortcomings of the past. Just own it. Okay, first off, none of us were there to do it, so we didn't do it. Okay, we have nothing to apologize for. What we do is say, but we shouldn't, what is it that said, those who fail to learn from their past are damned to repeat it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's learn from our past and then say, how do we do it differently this time? And then he's got some ideas that we certainly could implement in this side of Orange County. The problem I have, the opposite of his, he's very, very poor. This place has become very, very affluent. And so not in my backyard. In his area, it's not my backyard for a whole different reason. But ultimately, what we're trying to do and accomplish is the same thing.
Right.
What do we do to improve the quality of life of the people in our communities and those that do not have, in his case, decent living, and in my case, no living place to put a roof over your head? What can we do collectively? His tiny, well, he calls it small, it's a brilliant idea. We should have been doing that out here a long time ago. The problem is the property out here, no one's going to give us any, and it's very, very expensive. The problem he runs into is, yes, you can find property at a fair value. However, what it costs to get the infrastructure in place so he can do what he wants to do and needs to do is huge.
And we have additional challenges on being a rural settlement. So there's density restrictions.
You got that.
So we have to work through all of that.
I don't want to give up my horses.
Well, right. And we don't want you to. So we're not trying to, that's why we've been so intentional. We're not trying to cause Bithlo to become Baldwin Park or Avalon Park. Some of my haters, which are many out there from day one, are like, this guy must be up to something. He's out there to develop, redevelop. No, we're intentionally not trying to do that.
Yeah.
And candidly, the reason why East and West Orange County haven't gotten the resources they deserve, again, there's many reasons, but some of them are mostly not minority majority communities. So where has the funding gone for the last 60 or 70 years, rightly or wrongly? So the first question on most every grant application is, are you serving a minority population? We have to say no in Bithlo because it's 90% Caucasian. That eliminates you from a lot of the attention and resources that you would get. And then secondly, we're off the beaten path. If we don't care about the residents of Paramore and downtown Orlando, we do not want to see an illegal dump off the side of I-4 because it would offend us. Therefore, we would never allow a dump to be in Paramore. In Bithlo, there's a dump that the mayor of Orange County thought was such an imminent concern for public health. She ordered it closed and cleaned up 35 years ago. It's been closed and never cleaned up to this day.
Mom.
So
35 years.
So how did the people in Bithlo and surrounding communities react as you were coming in and making changes?
Well, I mean, immediately right off the bat, I realized that we were going to have to become stakeholders, because even though I said I lived in Orange County for 100 years, it was, well, you're not from Bithlo. So therefore you can't have any say so in what's happening in Bithlo. So really, as the organization got ownership of that property and we became a stakeholder, and then we started to have community cookouts and build relationships, we were able to show really over time, and maybe we're just seeing the fruits of that dedication and that consistency, because now people are going, oh, they didn't really come to develop over. They really are doing what they said they were going to do, because there had been some exploitation from a pastor previously in the community and another nonprofit that had really just come to take and be gone, and we were able to show the plan's the same. In fact, I was meeting with a reporter the other day, and she said, Tim, I met with you 10 years ago and you're still carrying the same placemats around. And I go, I know, the plan hasn't changed.
Yeah.
Because we're mission focused. And too often nonprofits get money focused. And so we're always $50,000 behind and struggling to keep things going, but we never change the plan. The plan is the same. Nonprofits end up chasing the money because they built a building, they hired some people, they don't want to let anybody go. So the funder now has decided to go over here instead of here, and eventually everybody's off mission. We're not off mission. We're never going to do that. We're never going to change the plan, because these ingredients are needed in every community for it to be a healthy place to live. And so we've got some folks out there now that are hating more than ever, but you know why? Because their kingdom is not the same. People are getting healthy, happy. They're succeeding on their own. They're not dependent on these guys, these losers that were just lording over them and keeping them down.
Yeah.
The alcoholic doesn't feel so bad when everybody's drunk, right? But when people start to get sober, you start to look really bad.
So nobody likes anybody.
Yeah. So that really was the thing. And then to the external community, we started having churches. My buddy Tony that I mentioned, the missionary, he started inviting churches that had gone to Romania to come to Bithlo on mission trips. And so we had churches from South Carolina and other places come initially. And then I'm in Panera one day, in Avalon Park, in Waterford Lakes, where it seems like 7 pastors camp out for their office, in the Panera. And I'm introducing myself to one of them, and I'm saying, yeah, we got a group from South Carolina. It's their 6th trip in 2 years. And, oh, why are they coming there? Because we're right here. And I go,
Right here.
why aren't you coming? And so that helped us to build that external relationship by really doing things without the establishment helping. Suddenly the establishment wants to get in because people don't want to be left out of success, to the point where now if you don't take a tour of Bithlo and you're running for office really anywhere in Central Florida, it's not good for you because we demand that you understand the issues. And then once you do, that you become a part of the solution.
Do you think that local government should be doing more to make organizations like yours and Matthew's Hope obsolete?
Interesting.
That's a good question.
Yeah. Not to make us obsolete, because government can't do what we do as well as we do it. In fact, I'm glad that finally we have some elected officials that recognize we shouldn't be the ones doing some of these things. But I think what government should be doing better is collaborating. In our expansion plans for Transformation Village, I made it clear I'm not going to send in 72 applications for permits. Either Orange County government says, we love this plan for Transformation Village and we're going to support it and be on board and help to make it happen, or we're not going to do it. And I think that's what government needs to do more of, is figure out how can we help you succeed.
Streamline it, simplify it, because part of the challenges are for both of us, you're constantly, you're behind the 8 ball. A good nonprofit doesn't sit on a lot of money. Truly, because you're called a nonprofit. You're supposed to be reinvesting. The challenge is, in the economy we've been on, especially for us, I can tell you, and I'm sure you've been through this with the pandemic, we're still reeling from the pandemic. We invested heavily, not because we wanted to, but because if not us, then who?
Right.
And then trying to recoup from that to where all of a sudden, in our case, we've been running at a $500,000 deficit, sometimes at one time almost $1 million before Christmas. And but if it was a choice of saying, we're going to take up what needs to happen here and do this, or we walk away. And I think this is where Tim and I are both built very much alike, is we're not people that walk away. We're like, okay, well, that didn't go as planned. Shift. What's the next step? But from the question you asked him, I have been saying for years that people say, look, this should not lay on all the nonprofits, and it certainly, our government can't do it. But if we can partner in some ways, and sometimes that partnership is less about money than it is about cooperation.
Yes.
Helping us make it easy to do something like him with his small homes. Like he said, instead of making me do 72 applications, let's just accept this for what it is. And then along the way, we can both agree that if we have to look at something again, because we didn't see that, sometimes, I call it the ripple effect. Every time we do something and grow, right now the big thing is our buses. We've done, we're adding some housing in Brevard and what have you, is I know when I drop the stone, it's going to splash. What's the ripple effect going to be? And sometimes you don't recognize the full effect of the ripple until a little further down the line. And then you step back, and with good partners, you sit there and go, we thought this, we've learned this. Can we shift to the right? Can we shift to the left? Whatever. And I think that the biggest thing, when you go back to what Tim said earlier, that the mayor 35 years ago shut this dump down. But what's supposed to happen was that they were supposed to clean it up. And it has not been touched in 35 years. I'm going to refer this back to when people say, well, Reagan caused a lot of the problem we have with the homeless and mental health, because he closed down all of the asylums. That is true. However, those that don't want to rewrite history, there was supposed to be a phase 2 to that. The phase 2 is develop places for mental health, that we weren't just throwing people in an asylum and basically warehousing people with mental illness.
Right.
A new administration comes in, it goes away, and now you see the results of that. So it's very much the same thing, is that we got to get proactive, not reactive. And when we're being proactive, how can we put these plans together and make them happen? Because if you don't do that, they get lost. And then what happens is, and I'm sure this has happened to you without even asking you, you finally get people that understand, and they're rolling forward. And one of two things, they either get voted out of office or they term out. And now you're starting over again.
Well, which is why I'm excited that even on the county level and state and nationally, we've got elected leaders that understand that the bureaucracy understands they're going to be there longer than them. Therefore, they pretty much ignore them. And now is the time to disrupt and the bureaucracy.
Right.
Because we have too many people in middle management in Orange County that control way too much money, and nobody knows what they're doing in a $4+ billion business. But I think Mayor Demings has been great at bringing in some new folks and that really are outside the system, that really want to see things operate better. I mean, I think another way we're alike, the Bible says the body of Christ has many members. The hand can't do what the elbow does or the knee. Well, I'm the ass in the body of Christ. Somebody has to be that disruptive voice that says, this is not okay.
Yeah.
But not just complaining that something's not okay, but coming forward with a solution to the problem.
Yeah.
And then encouraging others to join in. And
I think that's the huge difference right there, is that the bulk of the people out there that are using their voice are simply bitch moaning and complaining about what they're seeing. And both of us in our own respective ways are bringing resolution, bringing ideas forward that are worth, for lack of, I don't like using this, a gamble, because everything else we've done hasn't worked. And this whole idea that we continue, we were talking before we went on What Live, that, we've served on boards where, well, we do it that way because that's how it's funded and that's how it has to be done. But we know it doesn't work. Yeah, we know that. But, so what I hear when I hear that is, well, I've got a job and I'm getting paid. And I think the one thing, and I think it's fair, and I don't want to speak on your behalf, Tim, but I refuse to ever let this be a job. No matter what I'm getting paid. Am I paid more than I used to be paid? Yes, I am. But I gave up my 401k and 7 years of no pay to get there. But I don't do it for the money. The minute you start doing for the money, you got to leave. It's a job now. It has to be a mission. It has to be a calling. And that's my appreciation for Tim and what he's doing, is that even when there's times I've disagreed with him, what I appreciate about it is that he keeps driving forward. He keeps giving his message. And like he said, his mission hasn't changed, much like us. I never anticipated being as large as we are, having multiple locations, having medical offices and mental health care and all that. But what you do over time, you have your mission, and then you realize what else you need to accomplish your mission.
Yeah, I was going to say that's another way we're the same. Is I had to squeeze into the nonprofit vehicle, but I'm an entrepreneur, and entrepreneurs are problem solvers. So I'm sitting here in this furniture store. You're an entrepreneur. You're not a nonprofit guy. So some people choose to get in the nonprofit business because they just want to have their career, but they're not mission focused. They'll go from sickle cell anemia to the March of Dimes to the Heart Association.
They're selling art at one time,
they're not bad people.
They're not bad.
But there's a handful of folks in this community that they're not going to jump ship until the problem is solved. And so I could name Michael Dippy with iDignity, and
perfect example.
There's a handful, sadly, not in the dozens and dozens, but there's a handful that are going to stay mission focused until the problem is solved. And so that's what I admire about you, Pastor Scott, and that's our commitment. Because believe me, if anybody had said when I was graduating from Boone High School I'd be spending any time at Bithlo, let alone 16 years in Bithlo.
Well, I grew up in Conway. Okay.
But we can't stop because the problem's not solved.
It's not solved.
And real people's lives depend on our success. So the largest unsheltered populations outside of the urban core of Orlando are in East and West Orange County, but too often they're undocumented because the geography is hundreds of square miles and we don't know where every person is. And that's why we have to get low access, low barrier.
Well, let me
shelters.
clarify one thing. Before everybody thinks we're serving a bunch of undocumented people.
Not that kind of undocumented.
They are just, it's kind of when they do a point in time count.
They're not counted. They're not able to be counted. We can't find them all.
The point in time count used to be 1 day. Then they expanded to 1 day with a week around it, right? But even then, especially with the new laws in place, the homeless, in our case, they become so transient. Not transient like we used to think of from up north and stuff, whatever. These are people that grew up and live in our community, but they're moved day to day.
They can't even set up a camp to be comfortable anymore.
You can't even lay your head down. And so what happens to try to chase those numbers down, a lot of the money that comes into the area through HUD and that is all based on what you can document. And the problem with it is we all know that if they're saying, I think this last year was more than 20%, excuse me, we know that number's way off. Because like at one year, a couple of years ago, they said we had like 3,500 homeless people. And I'm sitting there going, well, if that's true, then they all live in West Orange County, because my own count is 3,500 over the year of individual duplicated individuals. So we know the number's much greater. So again, it comes down to taking a fresh eye and bringing people together that have boots on the ground and say, okay, let's talk about this.
So Tim, describe the population of Bithlo when you started your work there. How many people are there? People living in poverty? Are there homeless?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, the population hasn't changed because there's really no units to be added to the geography. But what has changed is the way the demographics work. There was this big wooded field that forever had no people in it, and then a middle class development was built into that wooded area, which suddenly kicked Bithlo out of being Title I schools, suddenly kicked Bithlo out of being recognized as a community that really struggled in so many ways. It diluted all the numbers. And so, and then you had Colonial Drive go right down the center, which put Bithlo into 2 different zip codes. So you have a population of about 10,000, and about 6,000 or 7,000 of that is part of the historic Bithlo population. But then they all got diluted, right? And then we couldn't count them even in one block because zip codes divided them. And then we end up with historic trends like your uncle lives in your shed sometimes, or there's always been people in that wooded area in tents. And so suddenly it doesn't look like we've got even a homeless problem, right? Because it's just been the way things have always been. And now we have these 2 statutes that have collided in our state, and one doesn't get enough attention that's maybe been more impactful. We've got the no camping, which means you can't be on public property, but you also can't squat, which again, I'm not saying you should be on anybody's private property, but the reality is if a person doesn't live on their wooded area, they probably don't care if you do, as long as nobody's bothering them. But what's happening now is code enforcement is using the garbage and other things that happen, and they're literally moving people that day. Used to be you had to evict people. So you had a very expensive process that took forever. That couple or that individual left, more took its place. You couldn't afford, even if you wanted to keep evicting. So now that with the new law that took effect last summer, the sheriff can literally come, do you have a lease, and that day make you leave. And so,
and often they're leaving without their most important documents because it's all done in a rush. It's got to happen right now.
Bulldozers come.
And literally they bulldoze, and I've watched them bulldoze people's medications, their
generators,
there's everything they need to exist just went into a hole. Okay. And again, Tim and I, neither one of us are suggesting that for a minute that we're asking people to go and squat someplace. What he's saying, because we've dealt with this, is usually what happens is, got to remember, Winter Garden is not what it was when I moved out here 30 years ago. I moved out here. This was a sleepy little town. We had 1 restaurant. People wouldn't believe that. Okay. We had massive camps out here. That's kind of what got my attention at first. It's like, nobody's doing anything. I'd been homeless, and it bothered me that nobody was doing anything, and it changed my life and turned it upside down. But what was interesting was that most of the time when a property owner was notified about homeless people, they say, Tim, you got homeless people living back there. And most of the time they say, oh yeah, they've been there for years. They don't bother anybody. Oh, so you'll take responsibility for them if they do something. Well, I don't want to be responsible for them. Well, if you sign here, we'll have them out of here by this afternoon. Now, they will deny this has happened. But if that didn't happen, then how did all this happen?
Yeah,
that's exactly.
Or even more so, if you don't clean the trash up, we're going to start fining you $500 a day. Then the property owner has no choice but to make a move.
So now they're fining the property owner. That has happened. Other cool little things that have happened has been that we have a developer we're working with for our housing in Brevard, but he was doing a project in Orlando, and they discovered gopher tortoise. Okay. We actually wrote about this in a couple issues of Moving Forward, our magazine, a few issues ago. When a gopher tortoise is identified, it shuts the whole project down. Okay, so now you have all these people that were expecting to get a paycheck not being able to work. Why they survey the property, see if there's more gopher tortoises. Once that happens, then they have to relocate that. I notice I didn't say move. You have to relocate them. So you're going to have to find a way for that gopher tortoise to like better than where he came from to stay there, because they will make their way back within 100 miles. It roughly costs 10 grand per gopher tortoise. Then the next thing, they get them moved. Okay. Then they say, you know, there's homeless people here. And the developer goes, oh yeah, you know what? They actually are good for us because they leave our equipment here. We're just doing the infrastructure right now. So, you know, we realize they got to leave at some point, but they're okay. Well, the neighbors don't like it. What neighbors? If you look way back off in the distance, there's a house way over there, and they noticed a fire there one night or whatever and they want them off the property. He goes, well, I quite frankly don't care what they want. It's my property. Oh, so you'll take responsibility for them. Or the trash thing. That's my favorite. Okay. Whereas even during the pandemic, we were able to get Winter Garden to put out porta potties. Now, they didn't want to do it. They said, Scott, you locate them. You put it under contract. We'll pay for them. Okay. Because I said to them, I said, you think you got a problem now. Wait until these people are defecating wherever.
Right.
We don't know when the city's going to open back up.
Right.
The same thing. Why instead don't we just understand the situation we have, as we try to address it over a period of time, we put a dumpster there and we pick up the trash.
Yeah.
Most of these people, I can tell you, we give trash bags out all the time. And most of them, not all of them, again, not all of them are good people. I'll agree with you. Most of them are just regular, everyday people. They don't want to live like that either. But what do you do with it?
Well, buying trash bags is expensive. So
trash bags are expensive. They're not going to do it.
Yeah.
Right.
So we've been thinking on the east side, how can we set up a trash collection system to aid with this so that they can at least be stably located? Because when your only option for shelter is no option.
Right.
That's
the biggest
There's
problem.
no option. So again, we've got to have these shelters immediately because our folks in East and West Orange County have no option. I got a call from someone with the county, and they said they got a call from a neighbor that there was a fire in the woods, to your point earlier. Mm-hmm. And I said, it was cold.
It was cold.
Of course there was a fire in the woods. It was cold. That's why they had a fire in the woods. But they had no other option on a place to go. We're not a shelter at Transformation Village. We don't shelter. But candidly, I left a few buildings accidentally unlocked a couple of times this year because it got really, really cold because folks had no option. So we're excited about potentially collaborating on the buses and looking at other things we can do as a bridge to when we get permanent shelter options.
That's it. It's an inexpensive bridge, but ultimately it's not the answer. And that's what I've been telling with Orange County and Brevard County is all of them is we all have to understand this is not the answer. This is a bridge. It ultimately will be what I always call an end also. Mm-hmm. We may have shelters, but we'll also have this for certain situations. The buses should eventually become the end also. But again, when there's not only not here is not an answer, and it damn sure isn't a plan. And this whole idea, when I went up to Tallahassee and we went up there and I got to speak to some of the state representatives, looked me right in the face and said, well, Scott, this will force them to get the services they need. And I said, well, in all due respect, those services don't exist. And the answer was, well, you do it. I said, well, let me put this in perspective for you. We do it. The entire budget for homelessness is $35 million for the state of Florida. Mm-hmm. $10 million was recently added just on the short term based on this new law. Yeah. Okay. And that goes away July 1st.
Right. It's not recurring.
Right. $35 million. My budget is $15 million and I'm covering only 17 municipalities. The math doesn't work. And he said, he looked at me and he says, two things. The cities have the money and you know how to do it. Yeah. You'll figure it out. And I almost didn't know how to respond. I wasn't going to respond in a way that was probably going to be on camera. But the reality, not that I haven't, because there's times I've just said, you're an ass.
Right.
You just are. But most people don't know you're an ass, but they should know you're an ass. You got to have, not here is not an answer. And when it's dangerously cold or there's a hurricane coming, the last thing you want is people living around trees
Right.
in an area that has not been properly taken care of, as far as trimming back and all that kind of thing, you're looking for people to get killed.
During Milton, again, I battle with with Orange County. We partner well with Orange County, by the way. Related to where they put emergency shelters, they're not always very strategic. The highest concentration of mobile homes, trailers in Orange County is Bithlo.
Right.
The highest concentration of unsheltered homeless outside of Orlando, arguably, I would say, is East Orange County. And then they decide to open a school in Avalon Park, which might as well be Timbuktu, right?
Right.
So we're out literally doing a water rescue at 1:30 in the morning. I had to commandeer a canoe from somebody's front yard at 1 to go out because along the Econ River in a camp that was back there, 15 feet of water rose immediately. And the lady was on a platform 12 feet high and thought it was going to be okay. You know what I mean? And then even more than hurricanes is heat. We lose more people to heat than we do cold.
It's crazy.
And you don't have a cooling area to go. So that's why we're excited. We now have our community coffee shop and library open 7 days a week as a heating, cooling option. But we think that we can also leverage this unprecedented amount of money that Orange County has
Glad you
received
brought that up.
due to Ian and Milton, $250 million worth of money that should be connected to these two hurricanes, even though some of it's come years later, which, government dishes out money at such a slow pace. But the exceptional thing about these pots of money is they're allowed to be spent over years. COVID dollars, a lot of them were wasted because you got a check and you had to spend it in 90 days.
Right.
And so you just did more whatever. If we're really thoughtful, and this is what we're advocating very hard for, we should use those funds to add infrastructure and systems and capital to what we need in East and West Orange County, because both of our parts of the community were disproportionately impacted by Ian and Milton.
So you talked a lot about homelessness, and how is that impacting the work that you're doing in Bithlo?
Yeah, so I think a lot of society's problems are disproportionately impacted in communities like Bithlo. So the cure for diabetes cannot be addressed in 3 counties, for example, because it involves more than just access to insulin. It's healthy living, it's eating right, it's walkability. So if we can fix the specific geographic areas that have all of these things concentrated, we can really efficiently use our resources and relationships and our collective impact that one day we can actually transform communities.
So we've covered a lot of ground today, and I'd love to learn more about Transformation Village and to have you back if you'd be willing to do that.
Love
so
to.
We can discuss
I think we have to sit back because I think there's some issues that we're working on, that we're talking about, and a lot of things going on that I think that if we have them come back next week and get into some more of that area, because I think it helps. When you consider what Tim just said, often what happens and what's been trying to happen for years is they're trying to work from the inside out. And the truth is the bigger problems are on the outside in. And we invest in those and we work our way in, and we will, what he does in Bithlo, what we do in Winter Garden, Ocoee, Apopka, what have you. What's oddly enough is he sits kind of in the middle between my two campuses. So we can kind of come in from two ends while he's coming from this way. The point being is that is going to have a bigger effect on Orange County as a whole than the way they've continued to do it over and over again. The one problem, then I'll shut up because we need to wrap this one up, is that we're dealing with the city beautiful. I've watched Lake Eola be redone 3 or 4 times. I know you live down close to there. How many times can you reinvent Lake Eola before you eventually realize, well, there's a bigger problem in here, then we need to replace some trees and some asphalt.
Right.
Okay. And I think that's where we've got to get our leaders and the community to be the voice, because Tim and I are just 2 voices. If you take our collective supporters, that's thousands of voices. And that's what we need, is we need people to sit there and go, hell no, this is not okay. We got to quit thinking, well, if I don't have to see it, out of sight, out of mind. No, if it lives on the same planet as I do, then it's a concern of mine.
Yeah. And by the way, we've also got to do things more excellently than we've been doing them. So the reason people don't want shelters in their backyard is they see the image of what's happening downtown.
Don't even get me started. Do not get me started.
That's never going to happen in anything that we're involved in, because we're never going to allow that to take place. because we don't want to open up any place that wouldn't be the place I would want to go,
Right.
or a family member.
And that's
of
part of
mine
the
would go.
change has to be.
Absolutely.
You don't may do less because they're homeless or because they're in poverty.
Mhm.
They're no less a human being than we are. And we talked about that in one of our previous, talked about dehumanization.
Dehumanization.
Thank you. Dehumanization.
I struggle with
We'll
it.
just go with that. But lips aren't working.
Yeah.
But that's the exact point, is that, look, if don't give me your shirt because you got a hole in it or a rip in it or a spot on it. Give it to me because your fat ass just got too big for it. You want to give it away. Then that's maybe something I'm interested in.
Cool.
There's people that try to give us used underwear. It's like, and I've said to somebody a while back, I said, all right, fair enough. If I washed my underwear right now and gave them to you, would you wear them? He goes, well, no. I said, well, why would you ask me to ask a homeless person to wear my old underwear? So before we get off on a whole nother, because we will,
Yes.
we'll make it a plan. Tim will be back with us next week.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Tim, so much for coming. I'm so excited to learn more about Transformation Village and what's happening and the future to come, and you guys' partnership as well. Thank you, Scott.
Appreciate
Awesome.
it.
I'm excited to be back now that Scott and I are actually liking each other.
Yeah, that's right.
I
That's
am
right.
happy to see
God
this.
works in mysterious ways.
Thank you all for listening and watching. Please like and share so we can get this word out there and we can help support both of these amazing organizations.